Give us this day our daily bread.
Behold the Lamb of God. Behold him who takes away the sins of the world.
Drew, what you doing? The topic is how anger robs us of happiness. So we're going to talk a lot about anger, but that's not really the goal. That may be the problem, but the goal is happiness. And probably the thing I need to start with is that I'm the perfect person to talk about this. Now I'll tell you why. As a little kid, I had a terrible temper. I still do, but most people don't know it. When I was a little kid, I split one kid's head open with a piece of coal. He got me mad and I threw a piece of coal, hit him at the back of the head and split his head open. If I could have thrown a baseball that accurately, I'd have been in the major leagues. I chopped my brother's hand open with a butcher knife. He carried the scar for about 30 years. He got me mad while we were drying dishes. It wasn't fair, so I got him. Threw a ping pong paddle at a guy one time so hard I would have killed him if I'd have hit him. Shot 3 people with a bow and arrow that I made. I had a great big bow and arrow, and we'd shoot a full city block and shot 3 people with it, hit one of them in the eye. Didn't blind him, thank goodness, but he did wear glasses after that, so I don't know. But anyway, when I was ordained, I said, I think we already have our quota of crabby priests and angry priests. I don't think we need any more. So I asked God to work with me to start moving toward a little more gentle spirit. And after 50 years, I think he's made a dent. I might have to live another 150 for him to totally win the battle. But most people don't know about my having a temper. Most see me as a little more relaxed and gentle spirit, which says there is hope. But I share that with you because I want you to know that anger is such a real problem for so many people. And yet at the same time, we can learn to choose to move away from it. We can learn to respond differently to the situation. Because the goal is not just to get rid of anger. The goal is happiness. We deserve to be happy. The people around us deserve to be happy. And that's God's dream for us. Long before there was an original sin, there was an original dream. And God had this wonderful dream that we were going to be a happy people and that we would share that happiness. Well, it really wasn't very long after the sin of Adam and Eve, when they didn't trust God and decided to do things their way, that the very first sin after that that's talked about is anger. An anger that comes from jealousy with Cain and Abel. That Cain kills his brother, Abel, because he's jealous of him about his sacrifice, which was the best he had. And Cain didn't quite give the best he had, and then was angry with his brother because he thought his offering was more acceptable. Cain even said later, when God comes and says, you know, where's your brother Abel? And he's saying, well, how would I know him? I'm my brother's keeper. That's an interesting phrase. I don't know if we want to say we're our brother's keeper. That at least sounds a little strange in our day and age. But we are responsible for the happiness of people around us. Whether it's husbands or wives, kids, people we work with, all of us, we're responsible to create an environment of happiness for people. I think one reason God worries about this so much is that if anyone knows how much loneliness and pain and hurt are just built into human life, every person deals with so much loneliness and hurt and pain that God is saying, don't add to it. Please don't add to it. And he keeps trying to call us away from this anger. After Cain and Abel, there are this whole number of sins that our church says are the 7 deadly sins, or the 7 capital sins, or the 7 root sins, whatever we want to call them. But all of those are kind of the root of all kinds of other things that make people unhappy. So when we get angry, it's not just angry. It's the impatience. It's the aggravations. It's the harshness. It's the judgments. All of that stuff hurts us and hurts all the people around us. And maybe anger more than any of the 7 deadly sins. Because, for instance, one of the deadly sins is gluttony or drunkenness. Well, if I eat too much or I drink too much, I might get aggravating to everybody around me. But it basically hurts me. But anger just spreads. Anger just creates this whole climate around us that makes life miserable for people. So that's why it's God's constant calling for us to deal with anger. Are we going to feel anger in a hurry? Yes. In fact, anytime we're hurt, we're immediately going to respond with anger. But then what do we do with it? That's what God's asking. Do we nurse it along? Do we act on it? Or do we choose to go a little bit different direction? Do we try to build a little more gentleness into our life? Jesus picked that up when he was with us. Jesus said, I'm here to teach you a way of living. I am the way. I'm the truth. I'm the life. I came that my joy would be in you and your joy would be complete. So Jesus is trying to say, let's move away. Let's move away from that anger. He even told us, he said, in the commandments that God gave to Moses, he told us, thou shalt not kill. He says, when I try to fulfill that law now, I'm saying, not only don't kill people, don't even grow angry with your brother. Don't call your brother a fool and really mean it, because it hurts him. And don't hurt each other. So Jesus is constantly trying to call us away from that. Well, that brings us to us. If this is one of God's real concerns for the human family, and if this is one of Jesus' real concerns for the human family, then it's got to be our concern. Every parish, and we've talked about this so often, every parish should be a school of spirituality. a school of the Spirit, teaching people the gentleness of God's Spirit, teaching them how to be gentle, how to name the angers in their life, how to deal with the anger, and to see where it is in their life and where it comes from. And then for each person to really be encouraged, inspired by the community, that the community really calls us to be our best, and that we in turn then try to enrich the community by that spirit of gentleness. So let's jump right into anger. It's one thing to say, well, I don't want to be so angry. But I'm never really going to get past anger until I know what is the cause of my anger. Because there's a lot of different causes for anger. And unless I deal with the causes, just for me to go to the sacrament of reconciliation and say, I've been angry and I'm sorry for that and I want to move away from that, that isn't going to help me. I have to say, what's behind it? What's behind it for me? So let's look at a number of those causes. The one cause that's obvious is hurt, or a perceived hurt. And I want to make that distinction, because sometimes we're hurt when nobody intended to hurt us. We chose to be hurt because we perceived a hurt. And we got angry because we assumed. There was a lady once who was angry at me for a year. And I didn't know, I just knew something was very wrong. So I finally said to her, I know I must have offended you, but I don't know exactly what I did. I'll apologize if you can tell me how I hurt you. And she said, well, you were standing in front of church and you were talking to somebody outside the church, and I was coming from the parking lot and I was walking up, and you finished talking to them, and these were her words, you just turned on your heel and walked into church and never even said hello. I never saw the lady. I never saw her. So I apologized and explained to her that I have no peripheral vision. And when I have no peripheral vision, I don't see some things that other people see, but it was a perceived hurt. Anytime we are hurt, we are angry. It's the flip side of the quarter. You can't have heads without tails. You can't have a coin with one side and not the other. When we're hurt, we're angry, and we feel angry. Then we have to decide later, what do I do with that feeling? And we'll talk about that a little later. Another cause of anger is an injustice or a perceived injustice. If I feel I haven't been treated justly by somebody, they may not have said something hurtful, but I'm still very angry. And when I talk about perceived injustice, let me just give you an example. Remember the story about the guys who went into the vineyard early in the morning and worked all day? And then some were hired at 10, and some at noon, and some at 3, and some at 5. Well, the ones at 5 got paid the full day's wage. And the ones in the morning said, oh, good, then we're going to get more. And they got a full day's wage. They perceived it as an injustice. And Jesus said, wait, was that an injustice? I agreed to give you the daily wage, and that's what I gave you. Are you jealous because I am generous? Because I gave the guy at 5 o'clock a full day's wage too? It's a perceived injustice. Let me tell you about another cause of anger. And this one is really crucial because it's very prevalent, and it's very prevalent among many women. It's when nurture in and nurture out are out of balance. Let me give you an example. This can happen for men too, but when a mom is nurturing her kids, nurturing her husband, maybe nurturing her parents, and is giving lots of nurture out, but there's not much nurture coming in. Her husband's not a terribly nurturing man, and no one else seems to see how hard she's working, and nobody else seems to really see all the needs she has for someone to just care and listen and take care of her. When that nurture that she's giving is completely out of balance with the nurture she's getting, that is always a cause of anger. And it's a very hidden cause. Many times when I deal with people who are wrestling with anger, and again, I said especially women, I'll say to them, what do you think about nurture in and nurture out? And we start talking about this. And they say, we think you hit something. Because they've never been able to name it. But once I named it, they say, yes, that's what's stirring in there. That's what's got me mad. Well, once they know that, they can start to name it. They can start to mention it. They can start to tell people about it. They can start to ask for nurturing back. And they now have started to deal with the cause of their anger and their impatience and their aggravation with their husband and their kids. But it also happens to men, and sometimes it happens in a strange way. When a father is nurturing his family by working very hard, and he really works hard to bring home the paycheck, and he's really trying to work hard, and he's trying to be nurturing to his wife, even though he might not be so good at it, and he's trying to nurture his kids. All of a sudden, he starts to realize, when we talk about it, that he's jealous of his own kids. But he could never have named it that way, because the nurturing that used to go to him from his wife is now going to his kids. And he sees the kids getting all this nurturing, and he's not getting any. And she always nurtured me for those first 3 years of the marriage till we had these kids. And he doesn't want to say out loud, I'm jealous of my own kids, but he is. And that's okay, as long as he can name what's happening. And he can say, you know, I'd have never seen that, but you're right. And that's the cause of my anger. That's part of what's behind it for me. That's what's so important. All right, let's look at some other ones. One of the other ones is a cause of anger is comparisons. This person's got more than I've got. This person is better looking than I am. This person's better at sports. This person's more intelligent. I got gypped. once I start feeling like I got gypped, then I'm in trouble. Because then I start carrying kind of a low-grade anger around all the time. Why did I get gypped in life? And those comparisons will kill us every time. Where, if some of you may be old enough to remember the Smothers Brothers, Tommy Smothers would always say to Dickie Smothers, "My mother loved you more than she loved me." And then he was always mad about it. And it was so much fun to watch him because they did it so humorously. But there's a lot of families where that goes on. And those kind of comparisons will always kill us. Another cause of anger is boundaries. Whenever my boundaries start getting trampled, I'm going to get mad. And that has two problems. One is other people may trample my boundaries and ask for all kinds of things that I can't do. And they're forever asking more and more and more of me, and asking me to do this and asking me to do this. And I've never learned to say no. So I keep saying yes, and then I go home and I'm mad all night because I said yes because I really didn't want to do it. Which is the other side of boundaries being a problem, and that's that some people don't know how to set boundaries. Again, as we start looking at all these causes, the more we can name the causes of our anger, that's how we start to deal with the problem. And then we can be a little happier ourselves and bring a little more happiness to other people. Let's run through some other reasons for anger. Pride. A lot of times these capital sins, these root sins, get connected to each other. Jealousy, anger, pride, they all get hooked together. Well, with pride, I can really grow in my anger because how could they say that and hurt me? Because I'm so wonderful. How could they hurt me? Well, because I'm just one of everybody else. They shouldn't have hurt anybody, but they certainly shouldn't have hurt me. Then my pride says my expectations. My expectations haven't been met. Well, maybe my expectations are pretty unreasonable because of my arrogance or my pride. And all of us fall into that. My expectations aren't met. Another cause of anger is not knowing how to be assertive. God wants us to be assertive. God doesn't want us to let people walk all over us. God doesn't want people to trample on us and take advantage of us. But unless we know how to be assertive and say, no, I don't think that's proper, or I wish you wouldn't say things like that because that hurts me. Those are good statements. Those are truthful statements. Don't do that. I don't appreciate that. When we don't know how to be assertive, then all we're left with is being aggressive. Aggressiveness is not a good substitute for assertiveness. And that's another cause of anger. One of the other causes, strangely, is loving people. And you say, well, how can loving people be a cause of anger? Because loving people makes us very vulnerable. Who makes you the angriest? It's the people you love the most. The people you love the most you've made yourself very vulnerable. You need their love, you need their affection, and when they hurt you, you have given them an ability to hurt you that is deeper than most people can hurt you. If some stranger does something that offends us, yeah, we're aggravated for a couple minutes. When someone we really love and whose love we need hurts us, then we really have some problems. The last one I want to talk about is kind of funny, but anger feels good. One of the reasons for anger is anger feels good. Sometimes, especially if it's righteous anger, you know, I've got a right to be angry, and it feels good to be angry. Well, it really doesn't, but it's better than feeling nothing. In fact, I've often laughed that a lot of people have problems with anger because their life is dull enough that they don't feel anything. And when they feel angry, then at least they feel something. But we can all laugh about it, but it's really true. You know, with righteous anger, it can feel really good to get angry. That's the way I feel. But it doesn't do me or anybody else any good. Let's go on to a couple very important distinctions. There's a big distinction between the cause of our anger and the occasions of our anger. And if we're going to deal with anger in our life, and if we're going to allow God to call us to gentleness, we have to make some of these distinctions. The cause of our anger and the occasion of our anger may be very different. The example I've used a lot is if I walk around carrying an open gas can full of gas, and I'm carrying this around all day, and somebody lights a match, and we have an explosion, anger. Who caused the explosion? Was it the match, or was it the gas can? Or was it both? Because lighting the match was the occasion. The cause was I've been carrying around this gas can waiting for somebody to light a match. I've been carrying around this kind of low-grade stuff, aggravation, anger, harshness, crabbiness. And all of us have got a degree in crabbiness some days. We can really get crabby. And all of a sudden, you know, the little kid dumps over the milk. Well, if you got 3 or 4 kids, somebody's going to spill the milk every day if they're little. But on a day when things are going pretty well for you, they spill the milk and you clean it up and you go on. But if you and your husband just had a big fight the night before, or you and your wife just had a big fight, and you're crabby, and you didn't sleep very good, and you got up the next morning, and then the kid dumps over the milk again, boom, the explosion. Well, the little kid just did what he does about 4 times a week, and that's dump over the milk. It's just, today, I'm carrying around a gas can. I've got to make a distinction between the causes and the occasion. The other distinction that's very important for us is the difference between feelings and decision. There is no such thing as an immoral feeling. Feelings are just the mercury in our thermometer. It just reacts to what's going on around us. What we feel is just a reaction to what goes on around us. So if, with a thermometer, if it's cold, it's going to stay at 4 below 0. If it's warm, the mercury in the thermometer is going to go up to 72. Well, we like 72 better than 4 below zero, but they're both good readings. Thank goodness it says 4 below if that's what it is, so I can wear a coat and put on a hat and bundle up because it's cold out there. Well, the feelings are just there. Morality comes in with the decision. If I feel angry, that's normal. What do I do with it? If I make the decision to stoke it and nurture it and stir the pot and spend the next 20 minutes saying how angry I am and why I ought to be angry and how could they do this and whatever else. All right, now my will has gotten into the action. Now my pride and my will are saying, let's stir the anger and stoke it all up and pour some more gas on it. All right, now I'm responsible. Now I've made a decision. Or if I act on it and go hit somebody in the mouth or shoot them with a bow and arrow or whatever we do. That's the problem. But this distinction between the occasion and the cause, the feelings and the decision, those are important. Let's go to some types of anger, and then we're going to take a break. The type of anger that most of us talk about is hot anger. Because hot anger is like a fire. We know it's going to burn us. Hot anger is when we're yelling, cussing, fussing, hollering, crabbing. That's hot anger. That one may not be as destructive as cold anger. What cold anger is this. If I have felt very powerless, and that's another cause of anger, feeling powerless. When I have felt powerless to change something for a long time, and I've been very angry about it, but I've swallowed that anger. And this happens a lot of times in marriages. Again, it can happen to men, but cold anger often happens to women, where they feel powerless to change something. And they start swallowing that hot anger and don't say much, and they think it went away, but it doesn't. If you swallow hot anger, it lives in here. It lives in our gut. And the symptoms of cold anger are, I don't care anymore. You do what you want. Do what you want. Go where you want. I don't care what you say. I don't care what you want. I'm done. I quit. That cold anger will burn us just as bad as fire, but it's more like dry ice. With dry ice, we don't know it's going to burn us until we lean on it and suddenly realize it'll burn us as badly as a flame will. Cold anger is so prevalent in some people's lives. And it's sort of like our spirit going into a coma, just like our body goes into a coma. When we're hit by a car and badly injured and there's terrible pain, sometimes our body goes into a coma for two reasons. One is it wants to say, I can't deal with the pain anymore, and it shuts down the pain. The other thing it does is it says, I want to use all the energy I've got left to protect myself and to heal the part of me that's still healthy and protected. When we go into an emotional coma, I don't care. You do what you want. That becomes a deep problem. It causes a lot of coldness in a marriage. It causes coldness in families and relationships. And it's something we really have to deal with. Another type of anger that we need to deal with is the difference between the anger of just blowing up and the anger I've alluded to a lot in this reflection. And that's the kind of anger that's just a low-grade anger behind the scenes, where there's just this constant aggravation and impatience and harshness. Often that's the one we have to deal with more than the hollering or the yelling. Let's end by going back to the beginning. We're talking about anger. Anger's the problem, but what we want to focus on is the goal. Anger robs us of happiness. We deserve happiness, all of us. God wants happiness for us. That's the dream he has for all of us. It's why he wants us as a church or as a people, as his people, his sons and daughters. It's why he wants us dealing with anger, because he wants us to deal with anything that blocks our happiness. We've just looked at all the causes of anger, and the reason I wanted to start with the causes of anger for us is that, as I said at the beginning, as we start to try to look at things honestly, it doesn't do much good to just say, I get angry. I'll never move past it and grow on that journey toward gentleness unless I know what the causes are. So we've started with the causes now. In the next session, we'll deal a little bit more with some distinctions about anger, and then we'll deal a little bit more with some of the types of anger that we have. So we'll see you at the next session.